Hello, and welcome to Magalia Rose Studio. My name is Kathy, and today I will be demonstrating my watercolor batik process in the creation of a painting I call Elephant Trio. The painting will be done on a half a sheet of gin washi paper, and that will measure about 25 inches by 19. If you decide that you want to go a little smaller, you can do a smaller batik with a single elephant, or simply make your elephant trio drawing smaller than the size I will be using. The process will remain the same. We often think of elephants as being gray, but they often take on a tan to reddish color due to rolling in mud and/or dust. The mud and dust protect them from both insects and the sun, and it gives us a fun color opportunity to change the color dynamic from gray to, in today's demonstration, a bright reddish orange that will look great against a blue sky. Let's take a look at some of those dusty elephants. After drawing my elephant composition, I go ahead and enlarge it to fit my half sheet of gin washi paper. It will be placed in the landscape format. I use an ultrafine Sharpie pen to transfer the basic drawing to the gin washi. In this painting I haven't included a lot of details in the elephants and no details in the foreground or background. I have decided to let the paint have some freedom in these areas. When I'm done transferring the drawing to the gin washi paper, I use push pins and to attach it to a board in which I have created from several layers of cardboard that have been taped together and then covered with plastic coated freezer paper with the coating or shiny side up. Be sure to use new clean freezer paper with each batik painting so that there is no paint color transfer to the new painting. I'm now ready to apply the first wash of watercolor. Using quinacridone gold and aureolin yellow, I apply a fairly light wash to the foreground, to areas I want to highlight on the elephants and in the background. At the last moment, while the wash is still wet, I drop just a very faint bit of quinacridone burnt orange under the central area of the elephants. I'm going to let this completely dry, and at this time I'll begin melting wax. I want to take just a moment to talk about the process of melting the wax and the types of wax I use. You can use just the generic paraffin wax that's often used for canning, which is a little more brittle, and sometimes with use you'll find out you prefer that for certain uses. You can also use commercial batik wax, which is available at local craft stores usually, or online. Always use extreme care when melting the wax. Use a commercial wax melter, or in the case I use metal containers such as old tin cans, and a small electric skillet that is filled with water, at all times filled with water. This can get very hot. The temperature I use is around between 180 and 200 Fahrenheit, and it can burn you, both the water splashing or the wax. So take great care, and only experience will tell you which types of wax you prefer to use. We're ready to start waxing, and this first layer of wax you're not going to be able to see because the wax is almost clear, and until I apply a darker wash over it, it won't stand out. But just to let you know, I have added some wax with a fine brush, moving in an upward slashing direction all toward various areas of the foreground and onto the elephant's toes to look like grass, since the area of the color that'll be preserved is sort of that yellowish brownish color. I've also added some highlight areas on the ears and trunks and foreheads of all the elephants, which you'll see in the next photograph. I'm going to cover three steps with these initial washes. Firstly, the tusks of all three elephants have been shaded with a little bit of a neutral I've made from quinacridone, burnt orange, and cobalt blue. I keep a little puddle of that always ready to be activated. Once those tusks are dry, I wax them, just the tusks. Then I apply a generous wash of quinacridone burnt orange, quinacridone gold, and a little aureolin yellow over their ears, faces, trunks. And I want you to notice that where I had left waxed areas on their heads and ears, that those are the highlights, and they're invisible until the wash brings them out. So that is something to note. Also is that the watercolor bleeds on Gen Washi. It goes out of the areas we have marked with our ultrafine Sharpie, and this is just one of the peculiarities of the paper, and it really makes for things to get interesting at times. So be patient, don't worry if it goes out the lines. Lastly, the elephant on the far left has been completely waxed over, so his entire head, ears, trunk, and his tusks are waxed. And now I will move on to waxing those areas of the other two elephants. Here, all three head areas of each elephant have been waxed over. And now I'm going to start thinking about moving on with painting their bodies. Using the same colors that I used on the heads, the quin gold, quin burnt orange, and the aureolin yellow, I paint the bodies. Now if you need some shading, you can see some darker areas there. Use that combination of quin, burnt orange, and cobalt blue. Please make sure it's cobalt, otherwise there tends to be a green cast. And you can also darken after these bodies dry, the paint dries, you can also come back in and accent some areas for shadow. So go ahead and paint again. Don't worry about it moving outside of the areas that you've outlined. That is part of the batik process. You can also start seeing the grasses that are there at the feet of the elephants that we put in earlier. Here is a close-up of the center elephant. Again, just the bodies have been painted. The heads have wax on them, which is why they appear to be a different color, tonality. Again, you can see the wash is moved out, but notice you can begin to see the texture of the Gen Washi. And that's one of the reasons I love working with this paper. When I have completed painting the elephant bodies and the paint is entirely dry, I am going to wax, and here are all three elephants waxed. And remember, just as a note, the waxing will be within the lines that you have drawn with the ultrafine Sharpie, and just disregard any areas that fall outside of that. So now I'm getting ready to paint the background and sky, which I'm going to do all in one sweep, and we'll discuss that in a bit. While the wax sets after painting the elephant, so we know that the elephant bodies and heads are totally covered with a layer of wax, I begin to plan the foreground and sky areas. If this were a more complex composition with trees or structural elements, I would paint and wax each area as I did the elephants. However, I wanted to keep it simple and emphasize the elephants, so I will be painting the foreground and sky at the same time. Using a number 8 quill mop brush, I begin painting the foreground with deep sap, burnt sienna, and a bit of ultramarine blue. Now you can see the little waxed grasses that were the first areas waxed become visible. I move the green up over the horizon line, knowing that when I paint the blue sky, the green and blue will mix nicely. The sky area is a combination of phthalo blue and cobalt blue in various concentrations. And now I'm going to let it dry. Remember, you can always come back after it dries and intensify areas, or if you like what it is, you'll just move on to the next step. Here is the final painting, and getting ready now. I'm melting wax to do the last 2 steps to create the batik, which is probably the fun part, and yet you will see it's sort of not sure what's going to happen, but that's part of the fun of the entire thing. So we're going to be now covering the entire painting with a layer of wax. Here the entire surface of the painting has been given one coat of wax. When the wax is totally set, you can remove the push pins and carefully release the painting from the support board, but do not get concerned if it does seem to crack a little bit, because you're going to be doing more additional cracking in a little bit. Now to crack, I simply bend and twist and push the wax, and you can see the cracks developing. There's no way of saying when is enough and when is too much. It is simply a matter of experience. Now I found that being cold, to the surface itself being cold, will help the cracking process. If it's a cold day, I sometimes set my painting outside briefly for a few minutes. And if it's a summer day, I often grab a couple bags of ice or even frozen vegetables and move over the surface of the painting until it feels very cold to the touch. By picking up and bending the painting, you should see the wax cracking. And again, this is just simply a matter of experience. Here's a close-up of the elephants, and you can see the cracking areas. At this point, when the entire surface has been cracked to what I hope is going to be an effective pattern, I simply lay the painting back on the original support board. We will be applying at this point a wash that's going to be over this entire painting. You are going to mix a large wash on your palette. I often use a mixture of the colors that I've already used in the painting, and if I need additional colors I can add indigo, sometimes even a little bit of a green for certain areas, but in the long run it doesn't make a large difference because you're only going to see splats of color that have crept under the wax where the cracks are. Now you're going to apply a total layer of wax over this wash. I keep a separate brush and a separate can of wax for this. I call that my dirty wax, and I brush the melted wax over the entire painting. This actually pulls the wax itself pushes the wash into the cracks. I know it may seem a little strange, but in the final process you'll see how that works when we do remove that final layer of wax. The process of removing the wax can be quite messy, and please remember you're using a hot iron and melted wax. Use care. Firstly, I protect the area on which I'll be ironing the painting to remove the wax with first a sheet of cardboard that is covered with a plastic tarp. I then place the original support board down and cover it with another layer of cardboard covered with several layers of craft paper. I lay the wax painting on this layer of craft paper and cover the painting with several layers of newsprint and or craft paper. Have the dry iron, no steam, heated to the hottest setting, usually cotton or linen. Run the iron over the top layer of paper until you see melted wax showing through. When the paper has absorbed wax, lift it off and replace it with clean paper and continue repeating. This process can be long depending on how much wax and the size of the painting, but use care, be patient, get as much of that wax out as you possibly can. When the wax has been completely removed from the painting, it may appear dark depending on the surface on which it has been laid, but don't panic. It's time to mount the painting on a piece of white archival mat board that has been cut to the size of the painting. The gin washi paper itself is very fragile, and that is one reason why we usually mount it on something more secure. When the painting is laid on the whiteboard, the colors come to life. You can attach the gin washi painting to the mat board with any safe spray adhesive, but my personal choice is to use Yes Paste, which I brush on with a stiff brush. Here is a photo of me attaching the painting to the mat board, the white mat board. Again, you can use a spray adhesive that is safe, archival, or Yes Paste is also another option. Once the adhesive or paste has dried, our watercolor batik painting is complete. You can frame it as you would with any watercolor painting, or actually any way that you choose. Sit back and enjoy until we start another adventure with watercolor batik painting. We hope to see you again soon.